Hello. Thank you all for joining us today. It's going to be great to discuss how to create must-attend events with Rhonda Wunderlin, SVP of Marketing for Questex, and Ben Chodor, President of Intrado. I'm going to ask everyone to introduce themselves via chat, even if you're watching from home, what you're looking to learn today, what your hobbies have become over the pandemic, and in particular, where you're from. And same for you, Ben and Rhonda. Give us a little bit of background about yourselves, but also your new hobbies and what you're looking to get out of this today. Rhonda, you want to start us off?
Sure. So I'm the SVP, as Michael said, of performance marketing at Questex, a media events company. And if I think about my hobbies during the pandemic, it would be primarily no work travel. Like, it has been so fabulous to not have to get on a plane 3 times a month to travel for work. So just being in my home and in my garden, I think that's really where I've spent my time during the pandemic, and probably eating too much.
Love it. And Ben?
So I'm in New York City, and I'm actually in a physical studio for one of the first times in the last 14 months. And it feels really good. Just it's a true sense of a hybrid, virtual and a physical location. If anything positive came from COVID for me, is in close to 30 years of marriage, it's the first time that my wife and I have spent, 380 days together, which is pretty amazing. And I've gone probably the longest periods of my life without missing a day of working out. And again, for almost 30 years. So best thing that came from it is I feel like I'm in the best shape of my life. And I've got to see my wife. Negative is every night seems like it's happy hour, right? So end of the day, you sit there and go, all right, I've been sitting in this cage for 14, 15 hours working. It's time for a drink. So that's the negative that came from it.
Yeah, I've taken a real liking to Vivino over this time, and I don't know what that tab has totaled up, and I'm really glad I don't. And it's funny you mentioned that. I got married just before COVID, and my hobby has been, it's been actually a real blessing. It's been wonderful. And one of the things that came out of it, the hobby for us has been reading to each other out loud. And so we got through Lord of the Rings and Joan of Arc, both of which are awesome reads.
Michael, I got to ask you a question though. When you're reading Lord of the Rings to each other, do you do the voices of the characters as you switch over chapter to chapter, or do you do it very straight?
It's really funny you asked that. You wouldn't believe it. If you ever saw my wife, you'd never believe that she does the best Gollum you could ever imagine. She crushes it. Yeah, and then the Elvish songs are a little difficult too, but yeah. All right, so our agenda for today, we're going to talk about really knowing your industries, pivoting and scaling quickly, and the hybrid future that all come together to create must-attend events. And Rhonda, I've loved some of the things you've shared about knowing your industries well and how that allowed you to pivot and to scale. Talk to us about that. Talk to us about knowing those industries.
Well, I think that first off, Questex was in a very unique position because even though 70% of our revenue prior to COVID was in-person live events, we have a very strong digital business. And so we have a relationship with our audience, 365 days a year. And so because we have really also strong content teams, we were on the edge of what was happening during, when COVID started. So obviously from the life sciences side of things, we knew the news that was coming out, what was happening in pharma, and there was just such a hunger to access that information. And then on what we kind of call our prosumer side, which, travel, hotel, hospitality, nightclub and bar was a big one where they're losing staff, they're shutting down businesses. Like, they were just eager to what do I do? What are other businesses like mine doing? And how do I just kind of survive through this? And so I think that was, we had that foundation to build on. And because of our digital side, we had a strong partner with Intrado in regards to being able to deliver webinars, which, we delivered 250 webinars a year. We were able to quickly, I'm going to say transform or transition versus pivot, transition to virtual events. So we could very rapidly Our first virtual event was in March, I wrote it down, 23rd. We were rapidly able to bring that news to our audiences. And so we went from, our webinar attendance was about 300 to 500. And we were, putting on these virtual events with 5,000 registrations and 3,000 attendees. So I think, again, we had that foundation that really enabled us to bring that news and that information to our audiences. But we also had strong partnerships that helped us do that quickly.
Right.
That's awesome. I think it's such a great story of not turning internal and going, oh my gosh, the world's falling apart. What are we going to do? To looking outside of yourselves and going, oh, everybody's falling apart. Everybody has challenges right now. There's actually an opportunity to serve those people in some ways even more than there used to be. And I think every hero story during the pandemic largely came from that. Ben, I'm sure you've seen that quite a few times.
Oh yeah, I mean, listen, pre-COVID, we were, the largest virtual event and streaming player in the space. We've always believed in, an event is event hybrid. One of the advantages Questex had is they always believed in it. But what we found is that there are so many organizations that never believed in the virtual side and that they were forced to make the move. And so unlike Rhonda's team, who actually knew what they had to do and were surprised by the uplift of additional attendees, other organizations were just happy that they were able to save their event and move it to the web or move it virtually. So we've seen all gamuts and all sizes of organizations make the leap. And we were lucky because we have, people in 17 countries around the world and close to 1,500 people supporting it even pre-COVID. So it's an exciting time in the space. The genie's out of the bottle, Michael. I mean, because Rhonda just said one of the coolest things she said is, you do your physical event, you get X numbers. You normally do a virtual event and you have 300 or 400 people. Now you have thousands attending. How do you go back to the other and say to a large percentage of the audience, we're not going to do both?
That's a great point. Rhonda, how did the numbers change? In particular, one event before and after, what kind of size were you looking at? What kind of difference were you looking at there?
Well, I think so. I think I'm going to answer that a little differently and not answer it directly yet. I think that first you have to think about, the transition. So it was not even though we were prepared and we had a team that obviously got overworked, it was transitioning the attendees because their experience was going to be different. I mean, it's one thing to sit at a webinar for 40 minutes or 30 minutes like we're doing today versus sitting at a 3-day event with multi-tracks that was being delivered virtually. So it was getting them to kind of think differently about the event, getting the sponsors to think differently about the event. So in a lot of cases, instead of just taking one big event and turning it into one big virtual event, what we did is we did series of events, right? We would do a series of webinars over a week, or we did a nightclub and bar evolve series where we did 2 virtual events a month in different cities. We filmed in different cities across the country. So I think it was, again, extending that engagement beyond just one event to kind of a series to keep people engaged. And so as far as the numbers go, I mean, they fluctuated, but we collaborated with a university here in the United States and did an event on education. We had 45,000 registrants and 26,000 attendees. And Ben, I know you have clients who did some hybrid and virtual events that had tens of thousands, if not more, of attendees. So I think, I do think we have to mention that people were sitting at home and they were kind of like, what do we do?
They had nothing else to do, right? So
right. So that did, and they were kind of trying to what's going on in my industry. So I think we benefited from that as far as the increase in numbers. But to kind of look into 2021, I think what we're seeing, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it, but it's not going to go away. I mean, we did about 97 virtual events last year. And let me look at the number. 22 were the really large multi-day, some multi-track events in 2020. And this year, already to date, and I know everyone's not vaccinated, but we've already done 21 virtual events. So I think that it's not going to go away. We're already planning in-person events this year, and there's a definite virtual component to those because we have attendees as well as sponsors who aren't willing to travel. So we want to make sure that content's available to both audiences.
Absolutely. And one of the things, so you managed that pivot very quickly. And I think that it seems like you had a lot of benefits in terms of how you operated and the team you had available. Can you unpack that a little bit in terms of what allowed you to make that pivot so fast? Because a lot of organizations wanted to go into virtual, wanted to start doing more digital, and really struggled to make that leap and make that transition.
Yeah, and I think it's multifold. I already mentioned partners, which I'll elaborate on a bit, but also internally, the teams and how we were able to put, like our event operations team, which was purely live in-person events. They did venues and catering and worked with GCS. They actually became our partner for the virtual side to do speaker sponsor coordination. So we really did kind of come together as an organization and collaborate across departments to really make this happen. I think, again, our previous relationship and our, kind of commitment and our partnership with Intrado gave us a step up, because I know there were people who came to us who, companies like Intrado, On24, all of them were just being bombarded with requests. And we had people come to us asking us to do white label events for them because they couldn't access a platform. I think that technology is a key piece to that success, and being able to integrate the right technologies. And I've said this before, there's not one platform, and Ben, I love Intrado.
No.
One platform that can do everything. So how we were able to bring, Zoom breakouts into the Intrado platform. We created a partner content hub with another technology, Path Factory, to where we could serve up, sponsor content by topic and capture leads for our sponsors like you would if you were in a live booth. And then, in some of our markets, like I mentioned on the prosumer side, Michael, we lost a lot of our audience members with, in the beauty and spa industry, in the nightclub and bar industry, in hotels and travel. And so partnering with InGo also really allowed us to keep that audience growing, even though we were, losing members every day due to companies shutting down or people losing their jobs. So I think, technology partnerships and our internal team coming together is really what allowed us to succeed.
That's awesome to hear. And Ben, on that point, you've seen, I imagine we saw quite a bit of transition, like what you were describing, Rhonda, from one big event a year within the industry to a series of events, one event a week, one event a month, a few over the course of a week, lots of different permutations. What did you see in that regard of what were the models that started to stick with people? Because there is that challenge of, if everybody's not in the same location, you don't have a captive audience in the same way that you do when they all go to Vegas or all go to Orlando.
It's exactly right. I mean, listen, in March, April, May, what you felt was, oh my God, my event was canceled. I have to do something. Let's just make it virtual, right? Not a lot of time to think about how am I going to make it interactive? How am I going to make it immersive? And what we saw coming out of 20 into 21, now organizations are going, okay, I need to make my virtual program more than just a 3-day program. It needs to almost be immersive, always on, because you can't just, in a physical event, you're limited to, we have the convention center for these 3 days or the hotel. So it starts beginning, middle, end, and see you next year. The power of virtual, you're able to go as things that lead up to the days of the event. Then you could follow up with people afterwards and keeping the connection going. And my prediction as we go into true hybrid, which is the next, or true event is an event, the power of it is there's going to be this always on immersive digital element and then a physical event. And how do you have the ability to engage with the physical audience and the virtual audience? And it doesn't only mean how does the virtual audience talk to the physical audience. And Rhonda said it so perfectly. Listen, it's in some ways the technology and the industry has been around for a while, but in some ways it is so new. No one's perfected the best way to engage. And it's why Rhonda said, oh, I could use this tool, I could use this tool. Let's put it together with a platform that we like. Same thing is going to happen as we go back to physical with a hybrid element. If you think it was really hard training staff on how to go from physical to just doing virtual, it is going to be 10 times harder training staff on how you're going to manage a physical and virtual audience. And they're both going to digest the content and interaction differently.
Yeah. And before we jump to that, if you don't mind, Michael, I want to just, since the topic is what is it? Successful event.
Must attend, yeah.
I will say, Ben, you actually hit on, I think, the key word, and that is engagement. And so, true confessions, when we first started, it was like we were doing just a webinar followed by a webinar followed by a webinar, but that doesn't engage. I mean, little things like that we saw a huge uptick on, which people are doing now, and we've all done for the last year, is just chatting with each other about what the speakers are talking about or where they're from. And so just getting them to engage, but then also creating opportunities within the virtual experience that is more than just somebody talking and presenting. So those breakout sessions that I mentioned where, a speaker or sponsor could talk to a group of people and they can ask questions in real time, face to face. We've done things like happy hours. We've had a band, that actually performed at one of our events. We do the virtual photo booths. Yep. So I think, the networking that started to come out in bazillion platform, every new platform that launched last year. I think those types of elements in the right, implement in the right way for the right audience have really helped drive that engagement and keep people, in the event versus going off to check email or something.
Well, so that's interesting. I mean, chat, what are the other things that make it more immersive and engaging that you've seen? I think that's such a big question.
One-on-one video chats are huge. Think about it. When it first started, you would go to, if there was an exhibit booth virtually, you go to the booth, maybe chat with the person, download some information, watch a video. Now you go into the virtual booth and you can actually have a two-way video. You can actually see someone that you're interested with that we'll call it a random encounter and have a video. And like Rhonda said in the beginning, it was 100% voyeur, movie theater type of technology. Now breakout rooms where you can have labs and people could communicate. I think the first chasm that we crossed is the audience that's virtual isn't just a voyeuring audience. They're involved and they're touching and they're interacting. And any way you can make it more engaging, adding matchmaking. So, oh my God, Michael, you should meet Rhonda because you guys have so many similar things. Why don't you schedule 10 minutes together? You should go to this booth, Michael, because we know you buy these products. This cuts it down from how do I figure out which of the 1,000 booths? And at physical events, we all deal with it, right? We would show up at an exhibit hall and go, oh my God, there's 300 booths here. How do I figure out who do I want to see? What's great about the virtual is if you use AI and use technology, we could find ways to get you to where you want to be with one click as opposed to a 15-minute walk.
Right. It's a great point. What was that, Rhonda?
I was just going to add, it's not like it's all figured out for any of us. We're still evolving today. Even, what we did from March last year to August last year to December last year to March this year has just evolved and changed as we've adapted and learned. So I think there's still great opportunities, and we're going to continue to learn and identify new ways to engage.
Yeah, I'm sure. So Rhonda and Ben, you probably both have role models in terms of do you have in particular events or experiences that you point to and go, oh, that somebody the other day was saying Eurovision is their kind of consumer role model hybrid event where there's lots of audience engagement, there's lots of in-person engagement, and it's synchronous at times and asynchronous at other times. People don't always have to actually be there in real life to interact with the physical experience. Do you have guiding lights in that regard?
Ben's going to have to take that one because I have been too busy doing virtual events to watch other people's virtual events.
Totally reasonable.
Dog path to keep my head above water.
So I do have the advantage of I get to see every event every one of our customers do, right? So thousands of virtual events every single year. I think the ones that are the best are the ones that don't do the same thing over and over again. Like Rhonda mentioned, if it's 300 sessions, that's great, but it's the same thing. Mix it up, right? Have engagement elements, have some entertainment elements, have, one-on-one. Just enable me to have a more personal experience, and you're not treating me as an attendee like every single other attendee. Allow me to have some control. And also allow me to engage with things that I normally wouldn't be able to engage with, even if I was at the physical event. So again, how you gamify it. And pre-COVID, I never thought gamification was that important. It is one of the most important elements of these events, because if you're turning virtually, you want to play along, you want to get involved. What's going to entice me to go over somewhere, where at a physical event you go, oh, they have a cappuccino machine over there, or there's a cocktail hour over here. Virtual, you have to entice the audience, and you've got to constantly feed it to me and not expect me to be able to find everything on my own. So treat me as an individual, treat me with respect, and don't expect me just to click a button and watch for the next 4 hours. Because the scariest part about a virtual event is, unlike a physical event where I paid to fly there, I have my hotel room, even if I don't like the content or the sessions, I'm gonna meet my friends at the bar, or I'm gonna sit at the pool, or I'm gonna go play tennis, I'm gonna go do something. A virtual event, you're literally one click away from leaving. So give me options. If I don't like this, let me go somewhere else. And realize that we're all in different time zones also.
But it's still going to be great. And I think one of the things that this is revealing is that even at physical events, you're often in some ways one click away from leaving into your phone, or leaving into, not actually engaging the event in a rich and meaningful way. And so it's going to force us to rethink quality of production, quality of content, quality of engagement. I think it's really exciting. I think that, Rhonda, the reason I think the getting close to the industry is so important is exactly what Ben was just saying, which is think about me as an individual. What do I actually need and want? When COVID started happening, and everybody was like, how soon can I put on another physical event? You guys were thinking, how soon can I start adding value for my customers, for my audience? And it's such a paradigm shifting way of looking at value creation that it allowed for so much more success.
Yeah, and I want to say two things. I'll start with, I want to come back to production, but to what you were just saying, I think when we think about a successful event, and we've done that, we've come to our audience, we know what they want and need. And like Ben said, it's not one and done, like a physical event. Like, you need to follow up, you need to continue, and maybe it's not another virtual event, but you need to continue to engage with those people that attended the event post-event. So, we're able to take content from the virtual event and put it on our webinar, on our website, and promote it. We're able to, take assets that were developed in that virtual event and promote it out to the audience for people who who have missed that session or that kind of thing. So I think successful event really does, require that 365 engagement, like you were talking about. But you both mentioned production, and I think, a live event, there's a whole run of show. You've got some, everybody's scheduled, who's going to introduce the speaker, who's in charge of the technology, who's like, and virtual events, I think, we started off, and I think a lot of people, it's just a webinar. It's just you need to have somebody that opens it and closes it. But we really have gotten to where we create a full run of show, making sure that the moderator mentions the gamification, go to the blah, blah, blah tab, and you'll see where you can win a blah, blah, blah if you do this. Or, coming up next, like really promoting and building what's happening next. So literally having a script and a run of show, and that more seamless production, like this is very well done.
Well,
I think even though we didn't have a script, I think that's really important for those transitions and that continual engagement.
Yeah, Rhonda, you need to treat it like television.
Yeah.
No matter if you're not, and television doesn't mean that end to end is scripted. It means, like you said, there's a run of show. Doesn't mean you still can't be natural. Doesn't mean it still can't be off the cuff. Doesn't mean that everything has to have $50,000 worth of production studio quality. what it means is understand what is your audience used to watching when they're watching from their devices or their monitors, and know that you have to be really organized. And a lot of people forget about that because they think because it's virtual, I can treat everything like a Zoom call where it's okay. And it is okay during COVID if your dog runs by or your kids, but it's about how do I create really compelling content and tell the story that I want my audience to get.
Or if your microphone breaks 30 seconds before you're supposed to go live because you're giving a tour of your house, like it did for us right before this event. I think
it is.
I think of events more and more. And one of the things I look at TED Talks as a side of, especially before COVID, of really thinking about what we would now call a hybrid experience of great reutilization of video. Like I think every event out there is dripping amazing content, and just oftentimes it goes to nowhere. But the thing I think that's interesting and an opportunity and a threat is that if you've got the best production value, and so people all over the world are watching your content either synchronously to the event or afterward or in advance in some cases, it's going to give your brand a massive advantage. And I wonder how many non-thought leading, non-production value, non-content leading brands survive and don't get eaten up by the ones that do have it. Right. So if I've got the best, if Rhonda's got the best education events and the best production, people all over the world are watching it. What keeps you from entering into the European market and the Asian market and the Australian market? Because people all over the world are engaging your content.
Yeah, that is such a good point, Michael. And we've started to see that. I mean, we're thinking about our events now, especially the hybrid ones where we are doing in person and live, about how we can expand that audience outside the geographical area that typically was drawn to the event. So yeah, that's a very insightful.
It was from day one, and it'll always, content is king, and good content wins out over anything else. So, right now, one of the powers is everything is virtual, so everything is available live, and then it's always on demand. But traditionally, even a lot of Questex shows and Rhonda's physical shows, you didn't capture every session. Not everything was virtual. You can't go back to that world and not capture that content and make it available and reuse it. And like you said, production value, if you're going to take your content and reuse it and cut it up into small form, into TED Talk size, again, you got to, think of it as you're creating television.
And I'll interject a short of shameless plug there. Content's king, but we do find relationships are key.
Yep.
People show up to events for other people in a lot of cases. That's why it's been great. Rhonda's given us really great feedback on VIPs. We started noticing that across an event. Oh, go ahead.
No, I just should have gotten some metrics. I'm so sorry. But yeah, there are events where we've had like 4,000 registrants and 1,200 were referrals from people who posted the event on like their LinkedIn profile. I mean, I think, content is king, but engagement is queen. And that engagement happens when one of your peers is engaged with something. You don't want to miss out that, FOMO thing.
Well, that's the power of virtual, right? Is a physical event. If you're socially tweeting about it or posting something socially while the event's going on, it's great. It gives notice to it, but no one's hopping on a plane and going to that event because it's already happening. Virtually right now, the amount of people that you can amplify your message by using press releases or using your social or, whether it's Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn messaging, that's how audiences grow. And that's like another chasm that's crossed over, because as we go back, it's going to be how do we promote it to the virtual audience pre-hand and during the event? Because virtually, I could join anytime I want. And that's really cool. So I think we're going to see a whole new world. And Michael, what your company does is kind of key to it, right? What your organization does is you find right audiences or help deliver the right audience for my event.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to give a quick shout out to Mark Brewster from Explory, Sherry Huss from Freeman, Claire Puttyfoot from Informa, and Chris Williams from CompuSystems. They collectively brought about 40 additional people to this event, just those 5 or so. And so
because you found in your tool, you found that they were like influencers.
They're the VIPs for this event.
Yeah, they're the
so that's our thinking now. how do you leverage those VIPs from an event like one of your education or travel or one of those other events, Rhonda, to get them to now go and be VIPs for your next webinar,
Yep.
your next physical event too? And that's the part we're really fascinated about, is that all of these people are used to being treated like VIPs when they travel a lot, and they're getting a hotel lounge, they're getting an airline lounge, they're getting upgrades. And we're excited about how do we unpack that around the event as well? Keep them coming and engaging and bringing people.
Make me feel special.
That's right. How would we make you guys feel more special?
Yep.
We'll have to think more about that.
A free bottle of wine, single malt scotch, like that would make me feel special.
Right. A brand new
like
microphone for Rhonda. That'd be great.
It's not my mic that broke. It was this little thing that broke.
What broke?
It's my little USB because my computer didn't have a USB, so it.
Oh, the little converter thingy. Yeah, that makes sense.
Nobody
Well,
cares.
so the audience knows we were a couple minutes late because Rhonda was very nicely giving us a tour of her beautiful house, and in the process, lost audio. So, but thank you for bearing with us. We appreciate the questions and your engagement and you being here with us. Especially, thanks, Ben and Rhonda.
Thank you.
Such a pleasure. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Michael.
Have a great
Nice
rest
to
of your week
see
and
you.
weekend. And enjoy
Thanks,
Napa.
everybody.
Thank you.